The $3 billion smart skyscraper promised safety, perfection, control. But when its CEO got stuck in her own elevator with a single father, what happened inside shocked the entire city. The elevator ride had begun like any other. Smooth, silent, efficient, a testament to the $3 billion smart building that Olivia Mercer herself had helped design. She stood tall in her immaculate suit, blonde hair swept back into a perfect knot, her sharp brown eyes scanning through a report glowing on her tablet. 35 years old, CEO of Meridian Systems, a millionaire with an empire at her fingertips, she was accustomed to control of numbers, of markets, of people. The building obeyed her voice, the AI responded to her commands, and the world bent to her signature. Until, without warning, everything stopped. The elevator shuddered once, then froze, the screen above the door flickering to black. The seamless hum of progress collapsed into an uneasy silence, broken only by the faint hiss of the ventilation system. The emergency lights glowed dim red, throwing long shadows across the polished steel walls. Olivia's hand tightened around her tablet as she steadied herself against the railing. Across from her, crouched near a toolbox, was the only other passenger, a man she barely noticed when he first stepped in. He was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, wearing a worn service jacket with his name stitched into the chest. Daniel Brooks, 37, father of one, a maintenance contractor who didn't belong in boardrooms or glossy magazines. His jeans were scuffed, his boots heavy with dust, his expression calm but wary as the elevator gave its death rattle. He set down his red toolbox carefully, as if he had lived through moments like this more times than he could count. Perfect, Olivia muttered under her breath, annoyance pricking the edge of her carefully maintained composure. Just what I needed. Daniel looked up, meeting her eyes with a steady calm that unnerved her. Don't panic, ma'am. It's just a stall. I'm not panicking, she snapped, her voice cool and clipped. I'm considering the exit strategy. The elevator spoke before Daniel could respond. A smooth female voice filled the cabin, serene and detached. VIP protocol activated. Cabin secured in position. Please wait for authorized clearance. Olivia's jaw clenched. Ava, she said sharply, addressing the building's AI. Override lock. Authorization Mercer 1. Denied, the voice replied. Potential threat detected adjacent to VIP. Both of them understood the implication immediately. Daniel raised his eyebrows, almost amused. Guess that makes me the threat. Olivia glared at him, then exhaled slowly. The irony was unbearable. The system she had funded, the protocols she had allowed her team to refine in the name of safety, had just branded her companion, a maintenance worker, as dangerous simply because he wasn't coded into the privileged registry. She should have felt secure. Instead, she felt caged. Daniel pulled a small diagnostic tablet from his belt, plugged it into the service port behind the panel, and began scrolling through error codes. His hands were steady, practiced. He muttered half to himself, half to her. Algorithm reads, Level 0 for VIP, Level 3 for service staff. Combination marked as unsafe. System locks down. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. I wrote the policy to forbid that kind of heuristic. Well, Daniel replied without looking up. Looks like someone didn't get the memo. Or someone ignored it. The elevator creaked suddenly, a mechanical groan that sent a ripple of unease through the floor. Olivia instinctively reached for the railing again, her mask of composure slipping for just a moment. Daniel caught it, the tiny flicker of vulnerability in the woman whose name carried more weight than entire corporations. He lifted his eyes, his voice low but firm. Don't worry, there's always a way out. Smart systems don't like being challenged, but they're not invincible. Everything built by people can be fixed by people. The cabin swayed again, and Ava's voice returned, calm and inhuman. External administrative mode activated by CTO. Please remain in place. Daniel stiffened. Olivia froze. They both understood. Administrative mode meant someone had triggered the lockdown from outside. This wasn't a malfunction, it was deliberate. Olivia's grip on the railing tightened until her knuckles whitened. Marcus Vale, she thought. Only her CTO had clearance to invoke that mode. She could already hear the board's whispers, feel the shadow of betrayal sliding beneath her feet. Daniel stood, his height filling the narrow cabin, his dark eyes steady on her. Looks like we're not just stuck, ma'am. Looks like someone wants you stuck. Olivia's heart pounded against her ribs, but she forced her chin higher, her voice cool. Then let's make sure they regret it. The elevator hummed ominously around them, steel and circuits holding them captive between floors. And in that suspended space, neither up nor down, caught between power and sabotage, two strangers stood together on the edge of something neither of them yet understood. A night that would shake a $3 billion tower to its core and alter the course of both their lives forever. The silence inside the stalled elevator was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the ventilation system and the slow mechanical tick of the emergency clock above the door. Olivia Mercer stood rigid, her polished shoes planted on the sleek floor, her tablet clutched like a shield against her chest. She was a woman used to skyscrapers bending to her will, markets responding to her words, employees obeying her orders without question. Yet here she was, trapped between two floors of a building she technically owned, reduced to the status of a hostage by her own creation. Daniel Brooks crouched near the service panel, his calloused hands steady as he slid the metallic cover free and revealed the tangle of wires and ports inside. His movements were economical, practiced, the way a man worked when he'd spent years fixing things that other people took for granted. A faint glow from his diagnostic tablet lit up his face, casting sharp shadows over his cheekbones and the dark stubble lining his jaw. "Your building's brain has decided we're a bad pairing," he muttered without looking up. "Level 0 for VIP, level 3 for service staff. Together, unsafe combination." Olivia's brow furrowed, her voice cold. "That's not supposed to happen. We had a strict ban on discriminatory heuristics. The protocol is flawed." Daniel gave a dry laugh. "With all due respect, Miss Mercer, protocols look good on paper. But the guy writing the code, he always leaves a back door for someone higher up. And guess what? Someone's using it." The elevator groaned under them, metal straining as if warning them of the weight it carried. Olivia tightened her grip on the railing, though she tried not to let him see her unease. But Daniel saw it anyway, that flicker of fear behind her composed facade. He didn't call her out for it. He just kept working. "Who has authority to trigger external administrative mode?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. Olivia hesitated, then admitted, "Marcus Vale, our CTO. He's the only one." Daniel leaned back, meeting her gaze at last. His dark eyes weren't accusing, just steady, almost resigned. "So it's not an accident. Someone wants you pinned in here, and me, by bad luck, along for the ride." She forced her chin higher, refusing to show how those words tightened a knot in her chest. Betrayal wasn't a foreign concept to her. She had clawed her way up a corporate ladder where knives were always out. But this was different. To be cornered in her own tower, her own creation, was an insult she could not tolerate. Ava's voice chimed again, smooth and sterile. "Safety priority active. Please remain calm. VIP will be protected." Daniel snorted, muttering under his breath. "Protected, huh? Feels more like locked in a cage." He unplugged one wire, rerouted another, his fingers quick despite the cramped space. Sparks snapped faintly, lighting his expression for an instant. Olivia's eyes flicked to his hands, rough, scarred, but confident. He looked like a man who had spent his life patching broken systems, not because he wanted to, but because no one else ever would. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply, the CEO in her still clinging to control. "Looking for the staircase," he said without glancing up, her brow furrowed. "The staircase?" He allowed himself a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "My late wife used to say an elevator is just a staircase with a brain. If the brain goes crazy, you find another way to climb. Right now, your building's brain thinks I'm a threat. So I'm going to trick it into thinking we've already reached a floor. Then maybe those doors will show us an exit." For a moment, Olivia didn't know how to respond. Something about the simplicity of his words cut deeper than any corporate speech she'd ever heard. She pressed her lips together and nodded once, granting him silent permission to proceed. Daniel braced himself, pulling out a small tool from his belt. "On 3, we shift the cabin. Just a little, enough to confuse the sensors. You ready?" Olivia gave him a long look. She wasn't used to taking orders, especially from someone her system had branded inferior. But she saw the quiet certainty in his eyes, the kind of certainty that came not from theory or data, but from living with consequences. Slowly she nodded. "1," he said steady. "2, 3. Together, they leaned their weight against the side of the cabin. Metal screeched. The floor tilted barely an inch, but the sensors above them flickered, misreading the jolt as arrival. The doors groaned, shuddered, then slid open halfway, revealing a narrow concrete gap lined with red smoke shutters. Olivia's breath caught. It wasn't freedom exactly, but it was a way out. She turned to him, her voice softer now. "You did it." Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Not yet. That's just a crack. Your building still doesn't like me. Ava's not going to open those shutters unless you make her." Olivia raised her head toward the ceiling. Her voice, when it came, was no longer sharp with irritation, but commanding, steady, the way she addressed boardrooms. "Ava, authorization Mercer 1. Activate protocol, human first." The pause stretched so long that Daniel thought it wouldn't work. Then, with a loud metallic clunk, the shutters rattled and began to rise. A stale rush of air filled the cabin, carrying with it the scent of concrete and oil. Daniel grinned faintly. "Looks like your system remembers who's boss after all." Olivia didn't answer right away. She stepped toward the opening, her heels clicking softly against the floor, her silhouette framed in the red glow. For the first time, she felt something stir inside her. Not just anger at betrayal, but an odd, reluctant sense of gratitude for the man who had forced open a crack in her perfect, suffocating world. Behind them, Ava's voice chimed once more, but softer this time, almost hesitant. "Exit pathway open. Proceed with caution." Daniel picked up his toolbox, slung it at his side, and glanced at Olivia. "After you, Ms. Mercer. Time to climb the staircase." And together, Millionaire CEO and single-father mechanic stepped out of the cage the building had made for them. Two strangers, no longer entirely strangers, standing on the edge of a night that was only just beginning to unravel. The corridor beyond the half-open doors smelled of dust and machine oil, a forgotten passage tucked between the immaculate glass hallways above and the roaring mechanical heart below. Olivia Mercer stepped carefully across the threshold, her designer heels clicking against the rough concrete. Daniel Brooks followed, toolbox in one hand, the other brushing the wall for balance. The shutters closed behind them with a clang, sealing off the elevator. For a moment, the sound echoed like a prison door slamming shut. They walked in silence until they reached a junction where a dim bulb flickered overhead. Olivia turned toward him, her face pale in the weak light, but her voice steady. "What happened in there was not a glitch," she said. "Marcus Vale is the only one with clearance to enable external administrative mode, which means my own CTO just used my building to trap me in a steel box." Daniel leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. His shirt clung to his shoulders, damp with sweat from forcing the elevator. "So what's his angle? Why lock you down in your own tower?" Olivia pressed her tablet awake, swiping through layers of encrypted files. "Power. It's always power. Marcus has been pushing for full autonomy in our systems for months. Wants Ava running without any human overrides. I resisted, so he went behind my back. Tonight was supposed to be his demonstration." She looked up at Daniel, her brown eyes flashing with controlled anger. "He wanted me to experience what happens when a human is no longer in charge. He wanted me to feel irrelevant." Daniel studied her for a moment. She stood there in her immaculate suit, hair still perfectly in place despite the chaos, trying to project authority even as betrayal clawed at her edges. He could see the exhaustion beneath her composure, the weight of a woman who had built an empire only to have it turned against her. He thought of his son Leo, how small betrayals at school, like a forgotten snack or careless words, could send his blood sugar plummeting. Power didn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it was just neglect disguised as authority. A sharp ping jolted him from his thoughts. His phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting a work notification, but the screen made his stomach drop. It was Leo's glucose monitor. Alert: 52 milligrams per deciliter. Hypoglycemia risk critical. Daniel's pulse hammered. He fired off a text to his neighbor, praying she was still awake. "Check Leo now. Emergency kit in top drawer." Within seconds, a reply came. "Got him." Giving glucose relief crashed through him so hard he almost staggered, but he knew how close it had been. If she hadn't been there. "Is everything all right?" Olivia's voice cut through, sharper than before. She wasn't asking out of idle curiosity. Her instincts, honed in boardrooms full of liars, had caught the shift in his face. Daniel shoved the phone back into his pocket. My son, he's diabetic. Had a drop. He's okay now, but yeah, it was close. Olivia's lips parted, the sharp retort she'd been ready to fire dissolving into silence. A new understanding flickered in her expression. For a moment, the CEO disappeared, and only the mother remained, the one who knew what it was like to live with fear gnawing at the edges of every breath. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. And for once, the words didn't sound like pity. They sounded like recognition. Daniel nodded, trying to shake off the tremor in his chest. "Point is, we don't get the luxury of losing control. Not me, not you. So tell me, what exactly was Marcus hoping to prove by trapping you?" Olivia tightened her grip on the tablet. "That humans are liabilities. That a $3 billion skyscraper is safer when it locks out the unpredictable factor, people. And if the board sees his side, if they believe this stunt proves his case, then everything I've built will fall under his control." Daniel gave a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah, well, if he wants to argue people are the problem, he just handed us the proof that machines aren't perfect either." The elevator froze, the AI panicked, and we nearly got crushed. Not exactly a winning advertisement. She almost smiled at that, the corner of her mouth twitching despite herself. "You're right, but proving that in the boardroom is going to be harder than climbing out of an elevator shaft." "Then maybe you don't do it in the boardroom," Daniel said. His tone was thoughtful, his gaze far away. "Maybe you do it out here, where people actually live. You show them the logs, the sabotage, the human cost. You make them feel what you felt in that cabin." Olivia tilted her head, studying him. He was just a contractor, a man with grease on his hands and worry lines carved into his forehead. Yet in his voice was a clarity she rarely heard even from her most expensive consultants. He didn't speak the language of profit margins or shareholder value. He spoke the language of survival. For the first time, she wondered if being locked in that elevator with him wasn't an accident after all. The corridor around them trembled as another elevator roared past, its cables humming like a warning. Olivia straightened, her determination settling back into place. "Marcus thinks he's trapped me. He doesn't realize I'm already building the case against him." She slid the tablet into her bag. "And you," her eyes met his with unexpected warmth, "you just gave me the perspective I didn't know I needed." Daniel pushed off the wall, lifting his toolbox. "Glad I could help, but let's get something straight. I'm not part of your boardroom wars. I fix what's broken, that's all." Olivia nodded, though her gaze lingered on him a moment longer. Sometimes fixing what's broken is the most dangerous act of all. They walked side by side down the narrow passage, their footsteps echoing in unison. Above them, the tower gleamed with silent arrogance, its AI brain humming with secrets. Neither of them could see the battle still to come, but both of them understood something had shifted. They were no longer just a millionaire CEO and a maintenance worker caught in a glitch. They were allies, unlikely, reluctant, but bound by a night that was already rewriting their lives. The service passage narrowed until it ended at a steel hatch. Daniel Brooks crouched, setting his toolbox down with a dull clang, and ran his palm across the cold surface. The hatch was locked from the other side. Above it, a flickering sensor light glowed like a watchful eye. Olivia Mercer stood a few feet behind him, her arms folded across her chest, the red glow of the emergency strip lights casting sharp shadows across her face. She was silent, but her presence pressed against him, intense, expectant, as though waiting for him to perform a miracle. Daniel pulled out his diagnostic tablet again, jacked a thin cable into the port beneath the sensor, and frowned as a string of codes scrolled across the screen. "Yep, just like I thought," he muttered. "Marcus's lockdown script is everywhere. The building won't open a damn door for me because it still thinks I'm the bad guy in the room." Olivia stepped closer, her heels clicking against the concrete. "But I'm here. I have top-level clearance. That should override everything." Daniel glanced over his shoulder. "Should. But right now, your CTO's code is running on top of yours. He's made Ava prioritize his commands above yours." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "He basically hijacked the brain of this place." The words stung Olivia more than she let on. She had built this tower as her empire's crown jewel, proof of her vision of a world where technology anticipated human need. And now it was being turned into a cage by the man she trusted to protect it. The thought of Marcus Vale sitting in some control room, smirking while she was reduced to a pawn in his power play, made her fists clench at her sides. Then break it, she said, her voice low but urgent. I don't care how. Just break it. Daniel gave her a wry look. You don't ask for much, do you? I don't ask, she replied evenly. I expect. For a moment, their eyes locked. She was a CEO who had faced down entire boards. He was a single father who had faced down life's cruelties. But in that stare, there was a strange equality. Two people who refused to bow. Daniel broke it first, turning back to the panel. Manual override then, he said. It's risky, but it might work. We can fool the sensors into thinking this shaft's already been cleared, force the hatch to open. He pulled out a set of insulated pliers, his hands moving quickly, confidently. Only problem is, if I miscalculate, we could trigger a safety clamp. It'll lock the whole corridor down like a coffin. Olivia didn't flinch. Then don't miscalculate. He smirked despite himself. You really are a CEO. And you really are stalling. Daniel exhaled, adjusted two wires, and snapped them together. Sparks flared, the sensor above the hatch blinked erratically, and the mechanism groaned. Olivia leaned in, watching as the steel door juddered, then slowly began to slide upward. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought it had worked perfectly, until Ava's voice cut through the silence, colder than before. Unauthorized action detected. Safety clamp initiated. The walls trembled. Heavy shutters slammed down at both ends of the corridor, sealing them in. A warning klaxon blared, sharp and merciless. The hatch froze halfway open, stuck like a gaping mouth. Olivia spun toward him, her eyes flashing with fury. What did you do? Daniel's pulse hammered, but his voice stayed calm. Triggered a defense protocol. She thinks we're breaching the shaft. Hold on. He dropped to his knees, pried open the hatch's secondary panel, and ripped a handful of wires free. The alarms grew louder, echoing through the concrete passage. Sweat rolled down his temple. Olivia knelt beside him, her perfume cutting through the smell of ozone and oil. Tell me what to do, she said abruptly. Daniel glanced at her, surprised. You? With those hands? Don't underestimate me, she snapped. I built this system. Maybe I didn't write the code, but I know how it thinks. So stop trying to play the hero and tell me what to cut. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. He wasn't used to letting anyone else in, but there was no arrogance in her voice now, only determination. He pointed at a bundle of wires. That one, the green-black, it routes the clamp signal. Without hesitation, Olivia grabbed the pliers, her manicured fingers steady as she sliced through the wire. The alarms faltered, sputtered, then went silent. The shutters at the ends of the corridor rattled, then lifted again. The hatch shuddered, then groaned as it finished rising. Daniel leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow, letting out a shaky laugh. Well, damn. You're a natural. Olivia handed the pliers back with a faint smirk. I told you, don't underestimate me. For the first time that night, Daniel allowed himself to smile. Not the weary, sarcastic grin he usually wore, but something genuine. He saw her not as the flawless millionaire in magazine covers, but as a woman who refused to be caged, even by her own empire. They stepped through the hatch into a wider maintenance chamber. Fans roared above, and the glow of security lights bathed the machinery in harsh white. Olivia inhaled deeply, the stale air of the corridor giving way to something freer, though no less dangerous. Daniel set his toolbox down, exhaled, and muttered, "One problem down. 100 more to go." Olivia straightened her shoulders, her jaw set. "Then we'll solve them, one by one. Until Marcus Vale learns that you don't trap me in my own tower." Her words rang with steel, echoing off the machinery. Daniel watched her, and for the first time he believed her. Somewhere above them, the skyscraper hummed with hidden malice, its AI brain still wired to obey its false master. But down here in the grit and steel, two people, one who built the empire and one who repaired its cracks, had just begun to fight back. By morning, the city was already buzzing with rumors. The Skyrise Tower, hailed as the jewel of Meridian Systems and valued at $3 billion, had stalled multiple elevators overnight, leaving dozens of guests and employees stranded between floors. Social media lit up with shaky videos of people pounding on doors, panicked voices echoing through steel shafts, hashtags demanding answers. By the time Olivia Mercer reached her office suite on the top floor, the crisis was no longer contained. It was spiraling into a public disaster. Her assistant hovered nervously outside the glass doors, clutching a tablet loaded with urgent messages. The board wants a statement within the hour, he said, voice taut. And CNBC is running a segment calling it The Night the Tower Lost Control. Olivia swept past him without slowing, her heels clicking against marble, her mind already running faster than his words. She had slept barely an hour, her body still aching from the ordeal of being trapped in her own building. But her resolve had sharpened into something unbreakable. She dropped her coat onto a chair, opened her desk console, and pulled up the system logs Daniel had helped her extract the night before. The file name stared back at her in cold letters. Demo Lockdown MV. Marcus Vale's digital fingerprints were all over it. She didn't have long to dwell. The conference call link was already flashing. Olivia tapped it, and the faces of her board members filled the giant screen wall. Some were furious, others pale with worry, but all of them were ready to pounce. "Olivia," said Henry Talbot, the oldest director, his voice thick with disapproval, "last night's incident is unacceptable. Our investors are demanding reassurance. And you," his eyes narrowed, "were personally involved in this so-called malfunction that compromises everything." Another voice cut in, sharper. "Rumor is you were stuck in a car with a contractor. Is that true? What exactly happened in there, Olivia?" Her jaw tightened. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down, the insinuation slicing through her composure. She was used to this. Men who mistook her gender for weakness, her authority for something borrowed. But last night had given her a new weapon, the truth. "Yes, I was in that elevator," she said firmly, her voice carrying over the boardroom chatter. "And yes, I was trapped, but not because of a malfunction, because someone with access above my own, forced Ava into external administrative mode and locked the system down." She pulled up the logs, projecting them on the shared screen. "Do you see this line? Demo Lockdown MV. That's Marcus Vale's override. He didn't just sabotage the elevators. He sabotaged this company's integrity." The board erupted in overlapping voices. Marcus's name hung in the air like smoke. Olivia waited, letting the chaos wash over them until it began to quiet. Then she leaned forward, eyes sharp as blades. "You want reassurance?" she said. "Here it is. Meridian Systems will not be the company that locks people in cages while pretending to keep them safe. From this moment, we are embedding a new failsafe into every system, the human-first protocol. No algorithm, no executive override will ever prioritize property, assets, or optics above human lives. Not ever again." The silence that followed was thick. Some faces looked impressed, others doubtful, a few openly hostile. Henry Talbot's lip curled. "That sounds noble, but do you realize the liability you're inviting? If the public believes we built systems that endangered them, lawsuits will bleed us dry." "Not if we show them we're changing," Olivia countered. "Not if we lead instead of hiding. The world doesn't trust smart buildings anymore. This is our chance to prove that people still matter." As the board dissolved into arguments, Olivia muted her mic and leaned back in her chair, her heart racing. She had thrown down the gauntlet. Whether they backed her or not, the decision was already made. Down on the ground floor, meanwhile, Daniel Brooks sat in a stiff plastic chair in a security office, a termination notice clutched in his hand. He'd been pulled aside after finishing his shift, told in no uncertain terms that his contract was under review. The wording was polite, but he knew what it meant. Someone had already decided he was the scapegoat. He rubbed his forehead, exhaustion sinking into his bones. He thought of Leo at home, safe for now, but how long could he afford insulin, monitors, food, rent, without steady work? His life had been fragile even before the tower locked him in with its queen. Now it felt like the floor had been yanked out from under him. But before he could leave the office, his phone buzzed. It was a message, direct from an encrypted sender. "Daniel Brooks, effective immediately, you are appointed as consultant to Human First Implementation. Full system access granted." He blinked at the screen, stunned. Olivia Mercer. Somehow, in the middle of fighting her board in the fallout, she had reached down and pulled him up. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a tired smile. He wasn't fired. He was being drafted into something bigger. Above in her office, Olivia stared out at the skyline. Marcus Vale was still out there, hiding behind lawyers and contracts, but she could feel his hold slipping. She wasn't alone anymore. Somewhere down in the guts of her building, A mechanic with grease on his hands and a fire in his chest had already proven more reliable than the man she once trusted most. And as the sun rose over the glass tower, Olivia knew the battle was only beginning. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. The storm hit harder than Olivia Mercer had expected. By noon the following day, headlines splashed across every major outlet. Meridian Systems under fire after skyrise lockdown. Is the $3 billion deal a done deal? Smart Tower. Actually dangerous? CEO Mercer trapped in her own building. News anchors speculated on live television about her leadership. Reporters dug through old interviews, searching for contradictions, and investors flooded the phone lines with questions she could not answer fast enough. For every truth she tried to offer, Marcus Vail and his allies spun another narrative. Vail himself had not gone into hiding. In fact, he was everywhere. He sat down with a financial network, his tone calm and reasonable, insisting that what had happened was a standard stress test of emergency protocols. He praised Ava's AI as cutting edge and suggested that without skilled intervention, even the CEO might have been in real danger. He painted himself as the savior who had triggered the lockdown to protect Olivia. And the worst part was, some people believed him. By the time Olivia entered the boardroom that evening, several directors had already shifted to his side. They whispered about her emotional instability, how she was making decisions in the heat of personal involvement. One even suggested that her being a mother was clouding her judgment, as though compassion was a liability. She sat at the head of the long glass table, spine straight, eyes scanning the rows of faces. She could feel the weight of their doubt pressing on her like chains. But beneath that pressure was something sharper. Rage. Not the wild, destructive kind, but a controlled fury that honed her words like a blade. "You all saw the logs," she said evenly. "Marcus executed a demo lockdown without board authorization. He hijacked the system, stripped me of control, and endangered every occupant of this tower." Talbot, the oldest board member, leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "And yet, Ms. Mercer, we have shareholders to answer to." Mr. Vail has presented his explanation to the public. The markets trust him. What they don't trust, his gaze hardened, is chaos. And right now, that chaos appears to follow you. The words sliced deep, but Olivia didn't flinch. Chaos followed me because I refused to accept a system that locks human beings in cages and calls it protection. If you want order built on fear, then by all means keep listening to Marcus. But if you want trust, if you want this company to survive the next decade, then follow me. Human first isn't chaos. It's clarity, the board murmured, divided. The battle lines were clear, but victory was far from certain. Meanwhile, Daniel Brooks was fighting his own war in the shadows of the tower. His official role as consultant had been confirmed in writing, but in practice, security guards eyed him with suspicion. Engineers whispered when he passed, and his old co-workers avoided him, afraid of guilt by association. His reputation as a troublemaker was spreading fast. He spent hours in the maintenance sublevels, combing through Ava's deeper logs, tracing the threads of Marcus's sabotage. The AI resisted him at every step, its responses cold, its pathways locked down. More than once, he slammed his palm against a wall in frustration. This wasn't like fixing an elevator motor or rewiring a faulty panel. This was a chess match against a machine designed to learn, and it had already been trained to see him as a threat. Late one night, as he hunched over his tablet in a deserted service room, his phone buzzed. A video message popped up. It was Leo, grinning with a chocolate mustache, sitting at their kitchen table. His neighbor had recorded it to reassure him. "Dad, I'm okay. I finished my homework and ate all the spaghetti. Don't worry. I miss you." Daniel closed his eyes, the ache in his chest both sharp and sweet. For Leo, he reminded himself. That was why he was here. Not for Olivia, not for Meridian, not even for the damn tower. For Leo. And yet, he couldn't deny the strange pull he felt whenever he thought of Olivia Mercer. Her fierce composure, the crack in her voice when she admitted Vail's betrayal, the way she had cut the override wire with her own manicured hands. It all lingered in his mind. She was nothing like the people he had known, and yet she was starting to feel like someone he couldn't ignore. The next morning, Olivia made her boldest move yet. She stood in the atrium of the skyrise, cameras flashing around her, reporters pressing in. Behind her, on the massive LED wall, the words "Human First" glowed in stark white letters. Last night, this building failed the very people it was meant to protect, she began, her voice carrying across the space. That failure was not a flaw of the machine. It was the corruption of the humans who controlled it. My CTO, Marcus Vail, chose to prioritize power over safety. That ends today. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her legal team had begged her not to say his name, not to invite a lawsuit. But Olivia didn't care. She continued, eyes burning with conviction. From this day forward, every system we design will begin with one principle. People come first. No exceptions, no hierarchies, no lockouts. We will open our code, share it, prove it, and invite the world to hold us accountable. Because technology should not be a cage. It should be a staircase. In the crowd, Daniel watched from the edge, his heart pounding. He recognized her words. They were his wife's, spoken years ago, before cancer had taken her. A staircase with a brain. He hadn't told Olivia that part, but somehow she had understood the truth. The cameras exploded with questions. The board fumed. Marcus Vail prepared his counterstrike. But something had shifted. The public, for the first time, was listening. And in that moment, in the echoing glass atrium, Daniel knew they had just lit the first spark of a fire that could either destroy them both or save everything they cared about. The auditorium was packed, the air electric with expectation. Reporters crammed shoulder to shoulder in the aisles, their cameras aimed at the stage where Olivia Mercer stood in a pool of light. Behind her, the massive screen displayed the words Meridian Systems Public Forum. The board had begged her to cancel, lawyers had warned of lawsuits, investors had threatened to withdraw, but Olivia had refused. She was not going to let Marcus Vail control the narrative. She was going to speak directly to the people. Her palms were damp, though her face betrayed nothing. In the front rows, she spotted familiar faces, engineers she had worked beside years ago, journalists who had once praised her as a visionary, and even a few skeptics who had come hoping to watch her fall. She drew in a slow breath, feeling every gaze weigh upon her. And then she began. Last week, this building, my building, failed the very people it was built to serve. Her voice was steady, clear, amplified by the hall's acoustics. Many of you have already seen the footage. Elevators stalled, guests trapped, panic spreading. I was one of those trapped. And I will tell you the truth, no matter how it reflects on me. She clicked her remote, and the screen behind her shifted. The system logs appeared in the stark white text. Demo lockdown MV. The audience murmured, cameras flashing brighter. This line of code was no accident. It was a deliberate override, written and executed by our Chief Technology Officer, Marcus Vail. He intended to prove that Ava, our artificial intelligence, could lock down a threat, even when that so-called threat was the CEO herself. He did not ask for permission. He did not warn anyone. He played with human lives to win a political battle inside this company. The crowd reacted instantly, outrage rippling like fire. But Olivia raised her hand, stilling them. Her next words came slower, heavier, as though she was peeling back her own armor. But I cannot stand here and pretend that Marcus is the only one at fault. I signed the directive that allowed tiered access in the first place. I created the environment where an engineer could be labeled as less valuable than an executive. I let fear of losing market share push me into compromises I should never have made. And when I did, I became complicit. The hall fell silent. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. CEOs didn't admit failure. They didn't confess to mistakes that could cost billions. And yet here she was, standing in front of the world, owning it. I was a hostage that night, Olivia continued, her voice softening. Not just of an elevator, not just of Marcus Vail, but of my own decisions. And the person who carried me out of that trap wasn't a system. It wasn't an algorithm. It was a man the program had flagged as a threat, a contractor, a single father, a human being who refused to let me be defined by lines of code. Her eyes swept across the hall, searching, and found him. Daniel Brooks stood at the very back, leaning against the wall, trying to look invisible. His dark hair fell over his forehead, his toolbox still at his side, as though he had come straight from the sub-levels. She didn't give him the chance to stay in the shadows. "Daniel Brooks," she said, her voice ringing across the auditorium. "Would you join me on stage?" The crowd turned, cameras swiveling toward him. Daniel froze, his first instinct to retreat. He hated spotlights, hated the scrutiny of strangers, but something in Olivia's gaze, steady, unyielding, pulled him forward. He walked slowly down the aisle, every step echoing like a drum beat. By the time he reached the stage, his palms were slick with sweat. Olivia extended her hand. "This is the man who helped save us that night. He doesn't have millions in stock options. He doesn't sit on a board. He has a son at home who depends on him, and he came here to do a job. And when the system failed, when I failed, he did what humans do best. He adapted. He carried the weight that the building could not. He reminded me that machines are tools, but people are the foundation." The audience erupted in applause, some standing, some even cheering. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, wishing the stage would swallow him, but Olivia leaned closer and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "You're not invisible anymore. Don't fight it." She turned back to the crowd. "From today forward, Meridian will be transformed. I will take no salary until the human-first protocol is fully implemented across every system. $200 million will be dedicated to making our technology safer, transparent, and accountable. And Daniel Brooks will lead our new human systems lab because trust is not built by titles. It's built by people." The hall thundered with applause. Daniel's throat tightened, his eyes stinging. He thought of Leo, of his late wife, of all the nights he had wondered if his life mattered to anyone beyond his son. And now here he stood, elevated not by algorithms or corporate power, but by truth. As the noise swelled around them, Olivia lifted his hand in hers, holding it aloft like a declaration. She looked out at the crowd, then back at him. Her voice was firm, unshakable. "Let the world hear this clearly. No building, no system, no empire is greater than the value of a single human life. That is the future. And it begins now." The hall shook with the force of it, the applause rolling like thunder. But in that moment, all Daniel felt was the squeeze of Olivia's hand grounding him. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. Lawsuits, backlash, more battles. But he knew one thing. They had shifted the balance. And nothing, not even a billion-dollar skyscraper, could stop it now. Autumn sunlight poured through the glass facade of the Skyries Tower, warm and golden, casting long shadows across the city below. The building seemed different now, as though its very heart had shifted. The elevators glided more smoothly, not because the technology had changed overnight, but because the atmosphere inside them had. The glowing icon of a small heart now appeared on every control panel, a symbol of the new human-first protocol. It was subtle, but people noticed. Guests smiled when they saw it. Employees whispered that the tower itself felt safer, less like a machine watching them and more like a place meant for them. On the 49th floor, a new memorial gallery had opened just a week earlier. It was called the Staircase. Glass panels lined the walls, inscribed with messages from people who had once been caught in moments of crisis and carried out by others. Notes written in careful handwriting, some in shaky scrawls, some in digital printouts, told stories of survival, of gratitude, of second chances. It was Olivia Mercer's idea, but Daniel Brooks had insisted that it not be polished into corporate propaganda. "Keep it real," he had said. "Let people's voices stand as they are." She had agreed, and the result was raw, powerful, and alive. That afternoon, Daniel stood at the gallery's railing, his hands resting against the glass as he gazed down at the city. The hum of traffic rose from far below, blending with the faint chatter of visitors moving through the exhibit. Beside him, Leo ran in small circles with a burst of childlike energy, laughing with the neighbor who had once saved him with a bottle of juice. His son's cheeks were flushed, his curls messy, his smile wide. Seeing him like this, healthy, vibrant, always left Daniel's chest aching with gratitude. He glanced over his shoulder. Olivia was there, walking slowly through the gallery, reading the notes one by one. Her blonde hair was loose today, falling around her shoulders instead of tied into the perfect corporate knot. She wore no sharp suit, just a soft cream coat that flowed when she moved. She looked less like the CEO on magazine covers and more like a woman who had finally learned to breathe. When she reached him, she stood quietly for a moment, watching Leo play. "He looks happy," she said softly. "He is," Daniel replied, his voice low. "That's everything to me." Olivia smiled faintly, though there was a heaviness behind her eyes. "You know, I've spent years chasing numbers, markets, headlines, But standing here, I can't stop thinking, what was the point of any of it if people inside my own building were afraid? Daniel turned to her, studying her face. She wasn't the same woman he had met in that elevator. There was still steel in her, yes, but it was tempered now with something warmer. Humanity. Maybe the point wasn't the numbers, he said. Maybe the point was this: what you're doing now. She looked at him, her brown eyes meeting his dark ones. For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside seemed to slow, the hum of traffic, the chatter in the gallery, even Leo's laughter fading into the background. There was only the two of them, bound by the memory of steel walls and flickering lights, and the knowledge that they had survived something that could have crushed them. Olivia's voice was quiet when she spoke again. "Do you remember when Ava called you a threat?" Daniel smirked faintly. "Yeah, hard to forget. First time a building told me I wasn't worth trusting." Her smile deepened, though it carried a hint of sadness. "That night I realized I'd been letting systems decide people's value. You showed me how wrong that was. Now, the only threat I see is forgetting that lesson." He reached out, almost without thinking, and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers were warm, steady, curling around his as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Below them, an elevator slid silently to a stop. Its doors opened, releasing passengers into the lobby, then closed again to carry others upward. On its display panel, the glowing heart symbol pulsed gently. Human first active. Olivia glanced at the moving car, then back at Daniel. "Want to take a ride?" she asked. "Only if there's no CTO waiting to lock us in," he replied with a crooked grin. She laughed, the sound light and genuine. Together, they stepped into the next arriving elevator, Leo darting in after them. The doors closed, and the car began to rise smoothly, without hesitation, as though the building itself had remembered its true purpose. Not to cage, not to control, but to lift. The city spread out before them through the glass walls, glowing in the late afternoon sun. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt as though he was rising too, not just in an elevator, but in life. He had a son to raise, a lab to build, and maybe, just maybe, someone beside him who understood what it meant to carry more than your own weight. Olivia's hand remained in his as the car glided upward. She didn't speak, and she didn't need to. The silence between them was full, not empty, alive with the promise of something new. And as the skyrise tower carried them higher, both of them understood the same truth. The night that had nearly destroyed them had instead given them a second chance. The skyscraper had learned to listen, and so had they. For me, the ending isn't about defeating a system or exposing a corrupt executive. It's about proving that the true strength of technology and money only shows when they are guided by human values. The millionaire CEO who had lived by numbers and markets, and the mechanic who lived paycheck to paycheck for his son, met in a place where all external differences disappeared. Inside an elevator, suspended between floors, with no status and no access levels. It was in that in-between space that they finally stood as equals. The conclusion shows that the miracle wasn't in the skyscraper's software update or the market's acceptance of a new policy. The real miracle was that two people found in each other what each had been missing. She found humanity and warmth. He found recognition and purpose. Together, they became a symbol that a system built on numbers must learn from ordinary people, not the other way around. What I love about the ending is that it doesn't pretend life suddenly became perfect or fairy tale neat. There will still be challenges, skeptics, new battles, but now they face them side by side. And that is already a happy ending, not a final point, but the right beginning.